in the statement he presented to Parliament in December of last year. But what does it mean for your money? Is money coming out of your pocket? That's what some of you would want to find out. So our WhatsApp number is live 05555611034. I'll be giving you the opportunity to also make some phone calls into the studio and get some of your questions answered. At the right time, I'll announce the phone number. At the table this morning, I have the convener of the Ghana Individual Bondholders Forum. He's one of the top guys who's been making a lot of news about how government should not be allowed to use the individual bonds of citizens in this debt restructuring process. Mr. David Ganisha Tete has joined me at the table. David, good morning.
Good morning.
So this conversation is long overdue, and you've been making these statements a lot for the past few days. And people just want to understand, what is government asking them to give up? Because people have saved monies, they've been financially, responsible, and they've invested in some of these government bonds. And now government is saying they should do what exactly?
Okay, so let me try and break it down. Some of us put money aside on a regular basis. So let's say you have been investing, you've managed to set aside 10,000 cedis, and you have an investment goal to buy a house or build some capital to pay for your master's program, or to take care of you, pay your rent for your daily needs. Now, this 10,000 cedis, you would have put it in a government bond. At the time of buying the government bond, the government would have told you, maybe you bought it 2 years ago, that your bond, I will pay you coupon payments, which is interest payments, twice a year, every 6 months. And then when it matures in June 2023, I'll give you back your 10,000 cedis. Now, if you invested this at an interest rate of 20%, it means every 6 months you get 1,000 cedis out of your investments. And then on maturity, you get 10,000 cedis. Now, what the government is saying is that I'm in a crisis right now. And so that 10,000 cedis that you've given to me and that contract that I have, I may not be able to honor it. So I want you to change from the bond that you are holding, which gives you 1,000 cedis every 6 months, and invest it in another bond. Now, this new bond, I will not pay you any interest in 2023. This year, I won't pay you anything. The next year, I'll pay you 5%. And after that, I'll be graduating it up to about 9.1%. And then, out of the 10,000, I'm also not going to give you 10,000 upfront. I'm going to be giving you 15% of your money, and then another 15%, and I'm going to spread it over 10 years. So your 10,000 is going to come to you in thousands over 10 years. And that is what the government is asking individuals to do. So the plans that you had for your money, which you expect to get this year, you can't fulfill it. If you're supposed to pay rent, there's no money for you to pay your rent. If you have to buy, if you're on pension and you're using that to buy your drugs, you can't buy your drugs. If you wanted to go into your master's program this year, you cannot go and start your master's program. So there are many horrific stories about people who have plans for their money that they can't fulfill because the government says you should change into a new bond. So what we are saying is, look, this cannot be right. These people have worked hard and invested, and you cannot just take away their money by asking them to swap for a new bond. You cannot hold them responsible for the sins of the government by dipping into their pockets and taking their money. So that is our main cause.
So the Ghana Individual Bondholders Forum, how many people are we looking at here as far as you know?
So at the last count, we had over 120,000 people who had signed up on our website. And the website has crashed several times because of the volume of people who are signing up. But it's been restored this morning. I'm sure I won't be surprised if that number significantly goes up by the close of today.
120,000 people.
120,000
Are they individuals or groups
individual
or
bondholders.
Okay.
So to sign up, you put your name, you put your CSD account, and then you put the number of bonds you hold.
What's the CSD?
So anybody who is buying bonds directly in the market is required to open what we call a depository account. And that account is where your record of ownership in those bonds are kept. So anybody who holds bonds directly has an account in the CSD in his name, and the bonds are registered in that account. If you are selling, you sell from that account. But there are also individuals who bought indirectly. They may have put their money in a collective investment scheme, and that fund is managed by a fund manager, and that fund manager would have bought bonds on behalf of the individuals. Those people are also signing up on our forum, and we are representing them.
So if you have like a provident fund, and some of those funds are being used to buy government bonds, it means that your monies will also be affected?
Yes, but that means that those bonds would have been bought by the Provident Fund. So in the books of the CSD, the bonds will be held in the name of that Provident Fund. But yes, all those who are holding government bonds are affected. Pension funds, banks, insurance companies, provident funds, associations, groups, any group or association that bought a government bond is affected by this exercise.
I just want to give people the opportunity to ask questions, because you've been sending us tons of questions. Some of them we do not have the expertise to respond to. So if you want to understand the debt restructuring process a bit better, I would encourage you to link up with us through our WhatsApp number is 05555 61034. What questions do you have for the convener of the Ghana Individual Bondholders Forum, Mr. David Ganisha Tete? He's here to answer them now as my guest. So can government do that though? Because I've heard this becoming a sort of a legal tussle between the Attorney General saying that it's optional and nobody can be forced to accept the terms as the government is presenting it. And then I'm hearing other stories from elsewhere. So what's the legal basis for this request by government?
Well, we read the Attorney General's opinion to the government, which said that you cannot unilaterally take a decision to ask individual bondholders or bondholders to swap to another bond. So you need to give them an offer. So this offer is voluntary, right? If they are asking you to choose to swap to another bond, but they haven't been emphatic on what happens if you do not swap, what happens to your existing bond. So legally, it's a voluntary exercise. So at this stage, you are not being forced to, but the compelling reason is what happens if I don't sign up? And that is what has made a lot of individuals very apprehensive. When the program started, the government said individual bondholders are exempt. And I'm sure there's a reason why they exempted them, because individual bondholders rely on the sum, it's their salary. So they said individual bondholders are exempt, so they were dealing with institutions. During the Christmas break, the government says, I've added individual bondholders. And this was after the trade unions had threatened to go on strike. The government said, I've excluded pension funds and I have now added individuals, which we feel was very unfair, because we know that about 6.5 million people rely on income from bonds for their livelihoods. So you can't just swipe that wealth away. So that is our main cause. Please, they should leave out the individuals, deal with it as originally planned, and let people get their money so that they can live peacefully.
But the conversation does not end there. Even the whole concept of debt restructuring is something that a lot of people do not understand. For those who are hearing bonds for the first time, people are asking, so is the bond the money that you've sent there? What exactly is it? Help us to talk me through that process very well. I just want to be sure I get exactly what it is. We'll be taking some questions from our viewers as well.
Okay, so the government on a regular basis borrows money from its citizens in order to fund its business. The government does this by issuing what we are calling a bond. But it's really a promise that if you lend me money over 3 years or 5 years or 7 years, I promise to pay you a certain interest amount on your money every 6 months and give you back your money on maturity. Now, maturity can be 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. So there are some individuals who have given their money to the government to use for 2 years, some for 5 years, some for 7 years. And the government, with the contracts we have, is supposed to pay us as individuals interest on the money that we're giving to them every 6 months. So this is an arrangement that has been working, for the last 8 to 9 years. We've got an active bond market. If I invest for 7 years and I want my money back, I can take my security, which is the bond I'm holding, to the secondary market on the Ghana Stock Exchange and sell it to somebody else and take my money after 1 year of holding it. So it's a very fantastic arrangement that is in place for individuals to make a return on their money and for government to use the money for their various developmental projects. So that is a bond, and that is the contract that exists between people who have bought a bond and the government. So we have a contract between us, a lender and a borrower, right? If the borrower, for any reason, has, suspicion that I cannot honor my agreements, they have to call the borrower and say, these are my challenges. I may not be able to meet the interest payments. So how do we structure this? That hasn't happened. And you've thrown, an agreement to the borrower and given them a deadline that you should sign by this date. which is very unfair in the first place. It is not just Ghana that has gone through this process, but let me go back to the borrowing. So the government of Ghana has been borrowing consistently to fund projects. Right? They borrow from individual bondholders or investors, and they also borrow from the external market. Now we have borrowed so much that, given the revenue we have, we are unable to pay. And I'm breaking it down so everybody can understand.
Yeah.
We borrowed so much that we don't have enough revenue to pay our debts. So we have to do something about it. So we are calling all the people we owe and telling that we want to restructure because we can't pay you. Now there are different classes of people we've taken money from. And we are saying now, for that vulnerable class of individuals who have given you a little money from their savings, exclude them out of this arrangement. Now for the other people who are strong enough to withstand these shocks, you can go ahead and make that arrangement with them to extend the time which you have to pay back, right? And then continue your debt restructuring.
Have you been able to quantify from these 120,000 plus people who have signed onto the platform how much volume of money we are talking about the government wants to use in this restructuring process?
So in the wider scheme of things, we have about 385,000 direct holders, individual holders of government bonds. You've got about 1.3 million individuals who have investments through collective investment schemes that are also exposed. Now, if you put the individual bondholders together for this year, we are expecting the government to pay back 6.6 billion to all individuals that are affected under this program. Yes, 6.6 billion cedis.
And that's what government says it wants to use for a while before it pays you.
Yes,
in effect.
The interesting thing is that the government says we are not in a position to settle this. But if you take a look at the budget that the government released in November, which has been ably debated and approved in Parliament to a large extent, the government has been able to free up almost 27 billion cedis in that budget to spend on capital expenditure. And we are saying, look, what is the priority? If there are individuals who you owe 6.6 billion and you've been able to create this fiscal space in your budget, why are you spending on capital expenditure instead of settling the individuals?
We'll come back to talk about capital expenditure. There's someone who has joined us on our phone lines and they don't want to be named, but they want to share an experience with us. Good morning. Thanks for joining us on GTV Breakfast.
Good morning and thank you very much.
Let's hear your story, sir, because I understand you have some thoughts to share on this conversation at the table today.
Yeah, so somewhat first week in December, I received an email from the financial institution I have my investments with that as at November 21st, they have revalued my investment, which was almost, like I've lost almost, 20,000 out of this. Now, they didn't discuss anything with me, they didn't say anything. The next thing is that they've done this, and they send it to me. Okay, so that's fine. So second week, because we all need money for Christmas, I applied to get 40,000 out of it for my personal fee. And as I speak now, nothing has been given. And then my financial institution always, end up saying that because of this sense, blah, blah, with government, they are unable to, give it. It's really affecting my personal life in terms of what I do daily, paying for my children's school fees. Because, my whole sense in terms of planning for 2023 is based on this. We've been, including the December. The whole of December I was just in the house. I couldn't go out like everyone, go about, have fun and all of those things because, I didn't get my investment back. It's really, really worrying in terms of what the government is doing and then saying that you'll pay in like so many years ahead of us. What are we supposed to do? Because we are committed to that we are supposed to be and then leave. Now they've increased electricity and water. How are you going to survive? Some of my colleagues who have investments in these things do not currently have jobs. I have a colleague that has put close to more than $1 million because he got it from state redundancy and then other cases. Now even the money to pay for his rent, he doesn't have it. So, it's simple. They should do something about it. Let us get our money. Let us get our livelihood back and then be happy people because you were happy and then just within some few days you were unable to do anything, even for your own self or even for your wife and your children. It's really, really disheartening. And then kudos to the team working together to support us and pushing the agenda for the government to
Right. Um, is there more you'd like to share? I'm hearing what you're saying. So the bank is telling you you've lost 20,000 of your investment. I'm going to ask David what that means because that's not quite clear to me. When you applied for the 40,000 towards December, that has also not come through to you, and it's affecting how you run your home and your life.
Exactly. Yes.
I'll put the questions across to David and the concerns and try to get some clarity. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your story with us. You can do same by calling. Our phone number will be opening them very shortly, or you can send us a message on our WhatsApp line 05555561034. Thank you, caller, for reaching out to us. David, so one example is what we are hearing now. When the bank calls you and tells you you've lost X amount of money, what does that mean?
Okay, so when you buy a bond, you buy the bond at a price. Usually, when bonds are issued, they are issued at a par value of 100. So if you put in 10,000, you're getting a 10,000 in bonds. Now, bond prices change. When interest rates are going up, the prices of bonds fall. Right. Currently, in the last year, we've seen that interest rates have been going up consistently in the markets. So the value of bonds have been falling. The prices of bonds have been falling. So it may well be that our friend who just called in went to his bank to check on the value of his bond investments, and the bank told him that if you were selling today, the value of your bond has actually declined by the 20,000.
By 20,000.
And it is possible because interest rates have gone up, so bond prices have come down. Because interest rates have been going up consistently, the value of bonds have declined, significantly last year. And people, fund managers and banks who are marking what we call mark to market, who are marking these bonds to market, are compelled to give you the real market price of the bond as at the day you check or as at the day you want to sell. And yes, it is possible that you may have lost some money.
So what's the relationship between the interest rate and the price of the bonds?
Okay, so assuming that I bought a bond 2 years ago, which is paying interest rate of 20%, and currently government is issuing new bonds at 30%, it means I am worse off. And people who want to buy my bond will ask me to reduce my price so that when they buy my bond, they still get a yield of 30%, which is equivalent to the current government issuances of 30%.
Okay.
So because I'm holding a bond at 20%, I can't sell it at 20%. So I have to reduce my price so that the person who is buying from me can get a yield of 30%, which is equivalent to buying a new bond today. That is why when interest rates keep going up, bond prices will drop.
Okay.
So those who bought earlier are now affected. But the reverse is also true. If interest rates were dropping, bond prices would also go up. And we've seen that, as well in the markets.
There's another person on the line. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Your name and where you're calling us from, please. Is it Professor Mensah? Professor Mensah is Professor Mensah is an associate professor at the University of Ghana Business School, and he will also be sharing his perspectives with us. Prof, David is here. He's explaining to us what the whole restructuring thing means and what the agenda for the Ghana Individual Bondholders Forum would be. You follow the conversation since the announcement by government, and then you've witnessed the resistance from Labour causing government to backtrack, and then the resistance from the pensioners, which is also still in the air, no resolution to that matter. What are your current thoughts on where we are now in this conversation about the restructuring?
Right. So this is more or less a situation of stalemate. Stalemate in the sense that, bonds are contractual agreements. And obviously it is expected that, before there should be any change on the arrangement or agreement, one side cannot, decide on it. I think government struggled to identify the investor community in the entire exercise. And that is what has slowed down the process. Because I believe, when government started, they looked at, the agreement between government and then the various institutions that invested with the government, forgetting that individuals who are investing indirectly through these institutions also matter in the entire process. And so the problem has to do with the investor identification. That is what has brought us, this far. I would say that yes, it is an exercise in need. The country is dire in need of this exercise. And if you look at the bond composition, clearly, individual bondholders constitute quite huge numbers. If you look at the composition, clearly about per the 2021 debt report, the Minister of Finance, individual bonds are holding at about 16 billion worth of government bonds in total. And so it is quite a significant instrument for which, at the end of the day, if they are exempted completely, it will be government may not get the target that it is looking out for. This is an exercise that government is looking for about 137 billion worth of, savings in terms of skipping debt service if they should come through with this agreement. So if it turns up that individual bondholders are rejected as a result of government not engaging them, it will be a problem. But I think for bonds, once the individual hold up to a certain level of interest rate, that is his expectation. And with this expectation, obviously it must be met. So if there's going to be a change and the expectations will not be met, which turns out to be to the individual bondholder, the individual bondholder must understand what is about to happen. And so clearly it tells you that indeed both parties, if I say both parties in this context, I mean the individual bondholders and the government, which is the borrower. So in this case, we are looking at counterparty situation here, where the borrower is the government and the creditor is the individual investors, and then banks and then other institutions that invest with the government. They should sit down and then find a conversion point. Maybe government is looking at, raking in the 137 within the shortest possible time, which is making it, shift a huge burden to the creditor. But then if it turns up that the government reduced, that kind of expectation of hitting the target of 37 billion within the 2 years, possibly extend it to, 5 years, maybe that should be able to relieve, the individual investor base. So even if they're going to sacrifice, it won't be to the level that the current proposal is putting on the table.
Prof. Mensah,
so effectively,
the bondholders are essentially saying that it's unfair to expect them to accept the cuts that come with the new proposals being made by government, and that's the point that David and his friends on the forum are making.
That's why I'm saying that it has to do with engagement. Government will put up this proposal because they have a target. And the target is possibly to reap in the 137 billion within the next, 2 years. But then if we go beyond the political cycle and we look at it as an economic cycle, then probably government may have to extend the 137 billion to maybe 5 years. And with the 5 years, it should be able to change the proposal on the table. So maybe the interest rate cut might be different from what is being tabled now.
But it would mean that at the end of an Akufo-Addo administration on January 7, 2025, whoever is taking over from him may inherit the other side of that debt restructuring process. Is that something that we can do?
It is the state that owes. It's not a regime that owes. We need to get it different. If you get a difference, you understand that it's Ghana that owes. It's not what we call it. So when you are inheriting the country's political, space,
you inherit with everything that comes with it.
You inherit both the asset that the country has, the resources that the country has, and then the debt that the country has as well. So effectively, it's the government that needs to change its stance. Once it changes its stance, probably the burden that it wants to shift to individual investors, not the individual investors alone, other investors. We're looking at banks as well. And the impact on the banks, if we don't take care, we cannot accommodate that in this economy. So effectively, we have to make sure that there's a communication. Government should be able to look beyond the political cycles and ensure that they soften their stance to reduce the burden on, investors.
Prof, the last time you were here, I asked a question about whether treasury bills were safe from this proposal by government. And just yesterday or in the last few days, I've had conversations around treasury bills possibly also being roped into this. What are you picking? What signals are you picking from your end?
I have not picked any signal, but I can tell you that if government should rope in the treasury bills and treasury bill investors also give up on the economy, the entire economy will be grounded. Government needs treasury bills to be operationalized in the short term, on short-term basis, so that they can plan for long term. So if they turn out to rope in treasury bills and investors give up on treasury bills as well, like they've given up on bonds, I tell you that this economy will be grounded to the level where we cannot, manage it again. So that should be the last thing to look at. In this context. So effectively, government. I don't think government may be looking at that direction because the cost is going to be so huge. The cost on the economy is going to be so huge.
Right. Let me bring
aftermath of the entire debt exercise. If they should, come back and say we've got it a successful, debt exercise, and as a result of, you will not get even investors to invest in treasury bills anymore.
Let me ask a question that many people have sent to us since these conversations started, that this is a proposal by the government and the individual bondholders have a right or they have the option to say no, right?
Yeah, they have the option to say no. I mean, it is an open-ended kind of exercise that is going on. They are not obliged to hold on.
So in that case, what happens? What happens to the bonds that they hold? Do they remain as they are?
You still have contracts with the government, but government may not be able to pay you as you are expecting. So if your bonds are maturing in 2024 and you are expecting your principal to be paid and then maybe your interest to be paid this year and next year, government is saying that you will not get the money.
We didn't get the last bit of the submission.
You may have to sell it off
so if your bond is due,
you will not be sure.
Prof. Mensah, we lost a bit of your submission towards the end. Are you saying that if your bond is due sometime this year or the next, the government will not be able to pay the principal amount?
Yes, the government will not be able to pay. And for you to hold such a bond, it's the bond that has no market anywhere. It turns out to be a junk bond. And junk bond, if you put it on the market, you cannot get it at a price that you want. Probably, if you end up selling it, you may sell it below.
Yeah, I think the signal is not quite clear there. Prof. Mensah, I will entreat you to stay on so that we try and work out what those challenges are. We are not getting this very last bit of the conversation. But David, you heard what the professional in this field is saying. He's saying that the government will not be able to pay pretty much what you've explained to us from the beginning. So what do people have the opportunity to say, you know what, like this guy applied for 40,000, he was not getting it. It means there's no money or the monies have already been spent. Where's the money?
So yes, like I explained before, when you buy the bond the first time, your money goes to the government and the government issues a promise in return.
So the money is not there.
So yes, the money is with the government, but you are holding a promise, which is a bond. You can sell that promise anytime you want. So although it's a 7-year bond, you can go to the market and sell it to somebody else who is looking to invest. So there's liquidity. That's the ability to convert your promise or your bond to cash, available all the time. Because of these announcements by the government, nobody is buying bonds. So when you go to the market, you are unable to convert that your bond to cash. And that is what is happening to our person who called. Because the government doesn't pay you. The government doesn't provide you the liquidity when you want it. The government's only promises, I'll pay you on interest payment date and on maturity. So if you want to sell, you go to the secondary market and sell to somebody else. But now the secondary market is taken away because nobody is buying bonds now. That's why people are now unable to convert their money from their bonds to cash. So that's just one aspect of it. But the main aspect is that the money that you have given to the government, they are saying, no, we can't pay, or we don't want to, or we may not be in a position to pay. So let's swap. Now I want to give you a new promise. And this new promise entails me spreading your original 10,000 investments over 10 years and paying you interest 0 this year, graduating it to 5, and very low interest. Meanwhile, people bought these bonds maybe at an average of 20%. So individuals are actually going to be worse off. If you put 10,000 in today and you look at the new promise that the government wants you to sign up to, you're actually losing 50% of
So
your
you're
investment.
asking for a sit down, and you're going to ask that individual bondholders be taken off entirely?
Yes.
That's what you're asking.
That's what they are saying. Individuals should be totally exempted from this program.
When do you expect that meeting will take
So we
place?
have a meeting today.
Yep.
The Ministry of Finance has scheduled a meeting with the individual bondholders today, this afternoon at 3 p.m.
Thank you, David. I mean, I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to get back to you for details of how that meeting transpired. We'll be particularly interested in whether any offers or counter offers are made and counter proposals are made on your side as you engage with the government. But we'll get in touch with you again later on in the day to have a further conversation. Thank you for sitting with us.
Thank you so much.
And thank you as well, Professor Lord Mensah, Associate Professor, University of Ghana Business School, for joining this conversation via our Zoom platform and for sharing your perspectives as well. This is Breakfast on GTV. Happy birthday shouts going to Caitlin Bonnie.